The house sat at the end of a winding gravel road, tucked between two rows of sugar maples that turned gold every fall. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, peeling paint, a sagging porch swing, rust stains on the gutters, but to me, it was everything. It was the place I had taken my first steps, where I learned how to ride a bike with a bent front wheel, where I cried in the hallway after getting rejected from my first choice college. It was where I stayed up late helping Dad organize his pill trays when his hands had gotten too shaky, and where I made soup from scratch the week he couldn't get out of bed. I was the one who stayed. My siblings had long scattered to the wind. Melissa moved out at 19 to chase some modeling job that didn't pan out. Evan got married early and rarely visited, too busy with his wife's family holidays. But me? I stayed. I worked part-time jobs in town and took online classes when I could. I took care of the house. Took care of him. And then he died. It wasn't unexpected, but grief never really respects schedules. He passed away in the den, sunlight pooling on the carpet, and I was the one who held his hand through it. I called the hospice nurse. I made the arrangements. I cleaned the house from top to bottom before the extended family arrived. That's when things changed. Melissa walked in with sunglasses on like she was arriving at a red carpet event. Evan followed, all stiff and silent, already looking through drawers like he was on a scavenger hunt. I thought maybe, for once, they'd be kind. That we'd mourn together. That the house would hold us all for a few days, just long enough to say goodbye to him as a family. Instead, Melissa asked me, half joking, but not really, how long I planned to stay. I blinked. What? She shrugged. I mean, the house belongs to the family now. It's not really fair for one person to just live here, is it? I looked at Evan. He didn't meet my eyes. They waited until after the funeral to make it official. Sat me down at the kitchen table, the same one where Dad used to sit with a crossword puzzle and instant coffee, and told me that they'd already spoken to a lawyer. That the house was part of the estate, and since there was no will, it was going to be split between us. Melissa's voice was sweet, syrupy. You've been here so long, it might feel like it's yours. But we're all equal now. Equal. As if we'd all carried the same weight. As if they hadn't left me here with the responsibility they never wanted. When I asked what that meant for me, if I could buy them out, or keep living here while we figured things out, they exchanged glances. Evan spoke first, uncomfortable. We were thinking it'd be easier if you just found somewhere else to go. We're considering selling. Splitting the money. Selling. Selling the only place that ever felt like home. Selling the rooms that still smelled like his shaving cream. I sat in silence while they handed me a list of things to pack. Evan had the gall to slide over a plastic storage bin, already labeled with my name. Melissa offered me an old duffel bag, said it'd be easier than boxes. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded and went upstairs. But in that moment, something in me shifted. They thought I would disappear quietly. They thought I had no power, no options, no voice. They were wrong. I moved out the following Tuesday. Melissa didn't even come by to help. Evan showed up late with his pickup truck, tossing my boxes into the back like we were clearing out a junk drawer. No goodbye, no thank you, just a clipboard with a list of items I wasn't allowed to take. He said Melissa had made it. It had things like living room lamp, Dad's, dining table, family heirloom, and master bedroom mirror, gift from Grandma. I wasn't even allowed to keep the mirror. I didn't argue. I didn't even glance up. I was too focused on not letting my hands shake while I taped up the last box. It was like they'd been waiting for the moment Dad died to finally press down. As if his presence had kept some thread of decency alive. And now that he was gone, the mask slipped. Melissa told the neighbors I'd never really paid rent. That I had just kind of squatted there. She even joked to someone at the wake that I was more like a live-in nurse than a real daughter. Funny, considering I'm the one who drove him to every doctor's appointment. I'm the one who cleaned his bedpan at 2 a.m. I'm the one who got him to laugh after chemo. But that's how it goes when people rewrite history to fit their guilt. They kept throwing around words like fair and equal, but their version of fairness meant treating me like I didn't count, like the years I poured into that house didn't matter because I wasn't tied to it by blood. There was a moment, just a sliver of one, when I considered fighting it. I even looked into lawyers. But Dad hadn't left a will. Nothing was official. He always meant to, always said, "We'll get it sorted next month," but he was sick, and time ran out. Without paperwork, I had no leverage. No one to vouch for me. No proof that this house had been my whole world. So I left. I stayed on a friend's couch for a couple of weeks. Then a sublet opened up a small, one-bedroom, peeling linoleum, but clean. I moved in with 2 duffel bags and a used kettle. And for a while, I just existed. Numb. Not sad exactly, not angry. Just hollow. Until I got a phone call from the utility company. "Hi, we're calling to confirm the name change for the service address at Dad's house." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The request was made last week. You're still listed on the account." They want it updated. It wasn't the phone call itself that changed things. It was the implication. They had forced me out, erased me from the story, mocked my connection, and yet they still hadn't even bothered to manage the basic structure beneath the house. They wanted the image. Not the maintenance. That's when I realized something. They were standing on a foundation they didn't understand. And if I could find a crack, I could pull the whole thing down. I didn't know how yet. But something lit up in me that day, something sharper than grief and colder than sadness. Not vengeance. Not quite. Just truth. And the truth was, I'd spent my life building a home, and they'd spent theirs avoiding it. I had roots here. And I was done letting people who ran away decide what I was worth. They wanted me gone. Fine. But I wasn't done with that house. Not by a long shot. I didn't plan to go looking for revenge. But the way they discarded me, like I was some squatter who overstayed her welcome, gnawed at me every night. I'd lie awake in that tiny apartment, the ceiling fan ticking, and wonder, what else didn't they know? Because if they were this careless with the truth, maybe they'd overlooked something bigger. So I started digging. I went to the county records office on a rainy Thursday. The woman behind the desk looked surprised when I asked for land deed history. "That's not usually the kind of thing people your age come in for," she said with a laugh. I didn't laugh back. She handed me a binder of property records and pointed to the public terminal in the corner. I scanned through lines of legal print until my eyes burned. Most of it was jargon, dates, zoning codes. But then I saw it. A transfer of ownership from 12 years ago. Not the house itself, that had stayed in Dad's name until he passed. But the land underneath it? That was something different. He'd sold it. Years ago. Quietly. Transferred the deed of the land itself to a private investment trust. And even stranger, the buyer was listed under a dormant LLC still registered with the county. I blinked at the screen. Wait. What? I went back to the counter. "Can you explain something to me?" I pointed to the record. "Does this mean the house and the land are under separate ownership?" She leaned forward, squinted. "Looks like it, yeah. That happens sometimes, especially if someone needs liquidity but doesn't want to sell the home itself. They sell the land, lease it back for long-term use. So, whoever owns that trust now technically owns the land?" Exactly. "And the people living there?" "Are tenants. Legally speaking." I stepped outside with a tremor in my hands. My siblings thought they owned the house. And maybe they did. The structure. The walls. The furniture. But they never thought to check what lay beneath it. They didn't own the ground. Not anymore. And I knew what I had to do. I called the number listed for the LLC. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. The next day, someone called me back, a tired-sounding man named Rick who handled estate dissolutions and dormant assets. Yes, he confirmed, we still hold the title to that land. It's just been sitting. We haven't bothered to do anything with it. It's low priority. I asked if they were interested in selling. There was a pause. Well, Rick said, we weren't really planning to, but it's been 12 years. If you're making an offer, I'm listening. I didn't have much. But I had a small inheritance Dad left in a savings account with my name on it. I had my part-time job. And I had time to take out a manageable loan, time to fight for something that actually mattered. Within 2 weeks, we were in negotiations. Within 6, the paperwork was being finalized. And in less than 2 months, I stood at the edge of the gravel drive with a deed in my hand, not for the house, but for the land beneath it. The dirt they walked on? Mine. The porch they stood on to take smug family photos? Mine. The plumbing, the wiring, the structure's legal right to exist in that spot? All of it sat on my land. And they had no idea. Not yet. But they would. Oh, they would. I waited until everything was final. Until the ink on the deed had dried. Until the county clerk handed me a certified copy with a neutral smile and said, "You're officially the landowner now. Congratulations." It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like precision. The first thing I did was contact a property attorney. I wasn't about to make a mistake. I wanted to be clean. Legal. Undeniable. The house is a separate asset, she explained. But the land underneath it? That's yours. Which means technically, your siblings are trespassing unless they're operating under a lease agreement. There is no lease agreement, I said. Then you have every right to file an eviction. It felt surreal. They'd thrown me out like I was a stranger. Like my years there meant nothing. And now, I held in my hands the power to do the same to them, not out of spite, but out of certainty. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reckoning. I sent the first letter by certified mail. Notice of land ownership and required compliance, it read. I didn't even sign my full name, just first initial, last name, and the name of my lawyer beneath it. Within 48 hours, my phone lit up. Melissa. I didn't answer. She called again. Then Evan. Then both from a blocked number. I let each ring out. Then the texts came. Is this a joke? What the hell is this letter? You're seriously pulling a stunt over dirt? Dirt. That's what they thought of it. The land, the foundation, the ground they dismissed, just dirt. But dirt holds weight when it's beneath your feet. A week passed. The eviction notice was filed. The sheriff's department sent formal documentation, with 30 days to vacate unless a lease was negotiated. My lawyer offered them terms, market rate rent, utilities in their name, a signed acknowledgement of my ownership. They refused. Of course they did. Their egos couldn't process the reversal. Melissa left a voicemail screaming that I was tearing the family apart. Evan emailed something vague about reconsidering things for Dad's sake. But Dad wasn't here anymore. And when he was, they had already rewritten who I was in his story. Now it was my turn to write the ending. On the 29th day, a locksmith arrived with a clipboard and a neutral smile. The sheriff stood nearby, arms folded, the same way they had when I'd moved out with my belongings in garbage bags. Except this time, no one helped them. Melissa was red in the face. You can't do this, she spat, blocking the steps. The sheriff pointed to the papers. Actually, she can. Evan stood further back, pale and quiet. They tried to stall, to talk circles, to play for time. But there was no room left for excuses. The keys turned. The doors clicked. And just like that, the locks were changed. No yelling. No violence. Just the steady closing of a door they had once slammed in my face. I walked through the house afterward, alone. They'd taken what they could: the couches, framed photos, the TV. But the bones of the house were still there. The creak in the third stair. The paint chip near the kitchen window from the time Dad tried to fix the frame himself. The scent of old cedar from the hallway closet. Everything they didn't notice. Everything I remembered. I stood in the center of the living room, key in hand, and listened to the silence. For the first time, it was mine. Not borrowed. Not tolerated. Not resented. Mine. The house was mine now, at least in every way that mattered. The locks had been changed. The notice had been served. The gravel driveway that used to haunt me now crackled under my footsteps. But what no one ever tells you is that taking back something that was stolen doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it just comes with quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel heavy. Now it felt like air. But after the adrenaline wore off, I found myself standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty walls, wondering, now what? There was no cheering. No applause. Just the sound of the wind outside and a creaky pipe in the bathroom. I could still hear their voices if I let my mind wander. Melissa's sharp words at the funeral. Evan's silence when I begged for understanding. The sound of a bin being shoved into my hands. But now, those voices had no walls to echo from. I walked through the house slowly that night. Room by room. The den where Dad used to read the newspaper and underline articles to show me later. The kitchen, where I had scrubbed the same counters for years while my siblings visited for birthdays and left dishes in the sink. It was surreal to see it so empty. They had taken everything flashy, the flat-screen TV, the decorative mirror above the mantel, even a few paintings that were more sentiment than value. But they had left the real weight behind. And maybe that was fitting. I slept in my old bedroom that night. Not because I had to, I could have stayed at the apartment, but because I needed to. The mattress was gone, but I brought a sleeping bag and laid it out on the floor. Above me, the glow-in-the-dark stars from my childhood were still faintly visible. Somehow, they hadn't peeled off. Lying there, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. Like I'd stepped out of a storm and was finally learning how to stand on dry land again. The next morning, I made coffee in a chipped mug they had missed in the cabinet. I sat on the porch Dad built, watching squirrels dart across the lawn, and thought about what came next. Did I want to keep the house? Rent it out? Sell it? Burn it down in some metaphorical blaze and walk away forever? I didn't know yet. But for the first time, I had choices. I wasn't clawing to survive or begging to be seen. I wasn't being told I was lucky just to be tolerated. I wasn't waiting for someone to give me permission to feel like I belonged. I belonged because I decided I did. Later that week, a letter came in the mail from Evan. Handwritten, shaky. Apologizing, or something close to it. He didn't ask for the house back. Didn't threaten anything. Just said he never really understood what the place meant to me. I didn't respond. Some truths don't need acknowledgement. They just need to be lived. I repainted the hallway. Replaced the light bulbs they never bothered to fix. A neighbor came by and offered help moving furniture. I said maybe later. For now, I liked the emptiness. It gave me room to breathe. Room to decide who I was without their shadows stretching across the walls. Owning the land was a legal victory. Owning my story was something else entirely. And every creaking board I stepped on reminded me, I was no longer someone waiting to be accepted. I was someone who reclaimed what others thought they could take forever. I never threw a party to celebrate owning the house. There were no announcements, no photos on social media, no dramatic tours or champagne toasts. Just me, a can of paint, and a playlist of old songs I used to hum when I cleaned the kitchen after Dad fell asleep on the couch. That was enough. Some victories don't need witnesses. Some moments are too sacred to share. The house settled in around me slowly, like a sweater that had stretched out and finally shrunk back to fit. The walls felt taller now. The air felt quieter. Not empty, just calm. For the first time in years, no one was walking in with accusations or opinions about where I belonged. The locks were mine. The keys jingled in my pocket. The mailbox had my name. And the land beneath it all, the dirt they called worthless, was the foundation I had planted myself in. A choice I had made, not out of spite, but out of strength. I didn't turn into someone bitter. That was never the goal. Bitterness would have kept me shackled to their insults, their opinions, their approval. And I didn't need any of it anymore. What I needed was peace. And piece by piece, I rebuilt it. I started small. I cleaned out the attic. Boxed up the rest of Dad's things and kept only what mattered, the tie he wore every Christmas, the watch he polished every Sunday, the mug he always said made coffee taste better. I put that mug on a shelf by the window where the morning light hit just right. It made me smile. I fixed the porch rail that had wobbled since I was 15. Replaced the screen door. I even started planting tomatoes in the backyard, something Dad always meant to do but never got around to. It felt good. Real. Like living, not just surviving. Melissa tried to call once more. I didn't answer. She sent a message. You win. I hope you're happy. It didn't sting. It just felt tired. She still thought it was about winning. She didn't understand it had never been about beating them. It was about reclaiming something they had no right to take. My history. My dignity. My voice. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them in days. I had slept deeply, eaten well, watered the tomatoes, and smiled at the neighbor's dog without a trace of anxiety in my chest. That was the moment I knew I was free. Not just legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. Fully. I wrote a letter that week, not to them, but to myself. I wrote about the girl who packed her things into garbage bags and walked away without a word. I told her she did good. She kept walking, even when no one clapped. Even when no one believed in her. And when she looked down and saw roots beneath her feet, she realized she'd been growing the whole time. Now, when I close the door at night, I don't feel like a guest in someone else's life. I feel like a woman who stood her ground, literally, and built her life on it. This house isn't just a victory. It's proof. Proof that even when others bury you in silence, you can come back with soil in your hands and plant something stronger.